زحمة شوية. All right. Good morning. Again, the problem with these introductions, they raise expectations a little bit too much, and I thrive on low expectations. Uh, so I hope I'll be beneficial today. I'm not sure if you've attended before with us. I'm part of a team called the Credo Logos, and we also partner with Firm. And they both have a very similar mission, trying to find the common ground between faith and reason. Actually, our name, the name of the actual ministry that Dr. Maher founded, it tries to express this. Credo is the Latin word for faith, and logos is the Greek word for reason, our logic, and it's the same word that the Apostle John used to describe the word Jesus in his gospel. So we want to say that you don't need to choose one or the other. Both can live together. And Firm Faith in Reason Ministry is our Canadian partner, and it's exactly the same mission, same idea. One of the questions we are interested in as a team is the relationship between science and faith, our science and religion. I understand that this area is of great interest to some and very far from others. So I'll try to give a presentation that's not too boring for non-science buffs, but still stimulating for people who have those kinds of questions. I want to start with a quote from a very famous atheist, popular cosmologist, basically a scientist who studies the origin of the universe. He's called Lawrence Krauss. He's done a lot of popular work and debates. And he says this. He says the doctrines of religion are outdated. And that's for good reason. They were created by Bronze Age or Iron Age peasants, basically people from thousands of years ago, who didn't even know that the Earth orbited the sun. So the wisdom in those books is not wisdom at all. So they were wrong about their planetary motions, so he rejects their wisdom. Most scientists, he goes on, don't spend enough time thinking about God to even know if they are atheists, because they try and understand how the world works and God never enters into it. Basically, he's trying to say that most scientists are not actively atheists. They haven't examined the idea and rejected it. They just don't care about it. They want to understand how the world works and God doesn't come into their mind. It's just completely irrelevant. And in fact, the more we learned about the natural world, the more we've learned that you don't need any divine intervention to explain anything. Okay, so very eloquent, strong statement. And I want to break it down to two claims. He's trying to basically have two claims in this quote. Number one, most scientists are not interested in God. Number two, science renders God unnecessary. Okay, so these are the two ideas that I see presented here, and I'll try to engage with both of these ideas and try to give let's say, an introductory presentation of, you can be someone who's interested in religion and also interested in science and not find those things at odds. It's not an easy process, but eventually it will work out. Okay, so one thing, number one, most scientists are not interested in God. I would say, from a historical stance, this is just factually untrue. The very famous founders of science, the pioneers of the scientific revolution, at least in Europe, have all been Christians. The big names, Newton, Galileo, Kepler, Copernicus, Boyle, Faraday, just to give a few examples. And all of these people have been Christians and in tight relationship with the church institute that has invested a lot in the scientific advancement of these studies. Now, when I say that, immediately comes the reaction from an objector that says, actually Richard Dawkins said something like this, also a very famous voice. He says, it's no coincidence, it's no surprise that these guys are Christians. Everyone was. Everyone was a Christian. So it's not an argument for, the compatibility of Christianity and science. These guys were Christians, and basically we shouldn't be surprised that the first scientists were, okay? But the image that they try to draw is that these guys went into the path of science against what they believed, against the church's attempt to keep things under control. And the image is always like an image of conflict between the priesthood of the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages and the early scientists. These don't love each other. And one prime example is Galileo. Galileo said the Earth is not the Earth is not the center of the universe, but rather it's a planet that orbits the sun like all other planets. And the Church hated him for that. They resisted him. They burnt his books and burnt him at the stake. So that's the image. Well, Galileo is a very interesting case. We can discuss it more in the Q&A if you guys are interested. But rest assured, he was not burnt to the stake. He was only, let's say, kept inside his home. And after a long, messy fight with the church for mostly political and personal reasons, nothing to do with science, he was basically forced to stay at his home. And his home is still today in Florence. But I want to say something else. My argument is that the scientific curiosity of these early thinkers was not despite of their religious belief, it was because of it. It was because of their Christian core beliefs that they were interested in science in the first place. And let me explain what I mean. Now let me read you a couple quotes from two names of this list. Johannes Kepler. So Johannes Kepler, if you're not familiar, he's the guy that told us that the planets orbit the sun not in a perfect circle, but more in an elliptical orbit. Okay, that was his main contribution. He was an interesting guy who loved numbers, gave them a little bit of a sacred status. Okay, but look at his motivation to do science. He says, the chief aim of all investigations of the external world should be to discover the rational order and harmony which has been imposed on it by God, and which he revealed to us in the language of mathematics. According to Kepler, the language of God is not Arabic, okay? It's mathematics. Okay, that's why he gives numbers like a certain of a mystical, sacred status. But look at the motivation here. His motivation is not just to understand the universe for the sake of building knowledge. He wants to understand how God thinks, how God has ordered the world. For him, the act of scientific investigation is an act of worship. It's an act of trying to know who God is, what he is like. Now, Newton, the most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, I'm going to explain that in a little bit, but as Lord over all. And on account of his dominion, he is to be called Lord God, Pantocrator, basically the ruler of all, or the universal ruler. Let me explain what he's trying to say here. So these guys were not the first people interested in the natural world. Okay, for as long as human culture and history from ancient times has existed, there was an interest in the natural world. Okay, a lot of the let me say this, like the average 20-year-old in 1000 BC knew more about astronomy and the planetary motions than the average 20-year-old in the 21st century. They had time, didn't have light pollution. They spent a lot of time understanding this heavenly bodies, how they moved, and it was common knowledge. However, as you might, let's say, guess, in the ancient times, science was heavily intertwined with religion. You know the difference between astronomy and astrology, okay? Astrology, I understand your personality by, the month that you were born. And, today at least most people, reject astrology as a kind of a mythical thing, but hold on to astronomy as a scientifically rigorous discipline. But in ancient times, these things were intermingled, and with the development of the interest in the natural world, it was always associated with the spiritual world. And that's why the ancients, especially the Greeks, saw the work of God or the gods as being from inside the universe. The universe had its own soul, had its own spirit from inside, and that kind of spirit led the universe to be what it is. The Christians slowly tried to resist that. It took them a lot of time to resist this idea that the universe has a soul. No, they said the universe has no soul, but God controls the universe from outside, from the top. He is Lord over all. That's what Newton is trying to say. He's saying that this being governs all things, not from the inside of the universe. Okay, the universe is not alive in the sense that God is alive, but He is the Lord over all, and on account of His dominion, He should be called the Lord of all. So, this is just like a very quick historical survey of the, let's say, early European scientists that shows that they were interested in religion, they were interested in science, not in resistance to what they believed religiously, but because of it. They were prompted by it. And that is not just a historical thing. Up till now, surveys say that the majority of scientists have some belief in a supernatural God in a way or another. So more than 65% of Nobel Prize winners are believers in a way or another. Of course, not all of them are, nice evangelical kids, but I mean, but the idea of them having a concept of God is there. And I want to add that even in the Muslim world, okay, the same idea was there. There's a lot of debate of how the Muslim world contributed to the general scientific advancement, but the consensus is that sciences like algebra, like algorithms, some advances in medicine, we owe those to the Muslims, okay? Whether the Eastern Muslims of Pakistan and India, or the Middle Eastern Muslims like the Arabs, basically. So you find a trend that wherever a belief in a singular creator is, you always find scientific advancement. You don't find such association in China, for example. So historically, China has advanced so much in technology, like they make things, okay? Up till now, they're masters of manufacturing. But in ancient times, scientists were not interested in the pure sciences, mathematics, chemistry, biology, because these sciences are more about how to discover how the world works, not to make things. And some sociologists try to study this, and they attributed this to the lack of the belief in a singular creator. In Buddhism, for example, Buddhism does not believe in the creation per se the same way Christians or Muslims do. So in these cultures, you might find technological advancement, how to make things, but not scientific advancement. Curiosity about how things work in the universe. And you can try to understand why this happens. If you believe in a single intelligent creator, who rules the world and creates it like using a specific system, you might expect that the world is law governed. There are natural laws that govern the functionalities of this world. And basically, this is what science tries to do. It tries to observe the regularities of the universe and tries to understand them and express them in a mathematical equation that is then called a law, like, let's say, the law of gravity. Okay, that's one law. So think about it this way. If you don't believe in an intelligent creator, it is unlikely that you would come to this conclusion, that the world is law governed. And if you don't have that belief that the world is law governed, it is also very unlikely that you would develop a scientific mind that tries to understand and express these laws. Okay? So actually, the belief in one God is more congruent, more in line with this concept of the universe having laws that we should understand. One more thing. Let's say I come to the conclusion that yes, the world is law governed, okay? But who says that I can discover these laws? Yeah, and let's say if I believe in a God, I believe in an intelligent God who created the world intelligently and has set it up in such a way that it is governed by laws that are unchanging and they just work. Who said that these laws are discoverable in any way? What says that what happens in my mind, the study I do in my lab or my office, correspond in any way to the laws of nature that happen outside? So you need a second belief that says not only are there laws, but these laws are discoverable rationally. We can have a rational discoverability of the universe. And these two beliefs, you need a very strong Christian worldview about it. That worldview comes from Genesis chapter 1, where it speaks about how God created the universe, but also created mankind in their own image. And this gives like a theological, philosophical foundation for the concept of, you know what, we are created in the same likeness of the creator of the world. So we can understand how he thinks, we can understand how he works, and he has given us the responsibility of trying to understand his world and express it in our own mathematical language. So let me try to explain this a little bit more. C.S. Lewis says about reflecting on this. He says men became scientific because they expected law in nature. And they expected law in nature because they believed in a law giver. Even Einstein, you know, there are a lot of quotes that are attributed to Einstein that he never said. You know, it's like whenever you want to sound intelligent, he said Einstein said, you know, and a lot of the quotes attributed to him are not real. But this one is real. I'm sure I looked it up many times. He says, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe that it is comprehensible. You see what he's saying? He said, why on earth do we have the ability to understand and study the universe? It doesn't make sense. If everything is just here by a mere coincidence or by a mere necessity of nature, it's just, you know, a purposeless system that we simply have arisen inside, okay? What says that whatever happens in my head is also representative of what happens in the universe? Where did this relationship come from? We are just products of the universe and we shouldn't trust our minds because we're simply here. So he says, we shouldn't be surprised that science is successful. It is surprising. Science works. So it works. It has advanced our lives. We've used it to understand how the world works. We've solved problems. We've utilized energy. We flew to the moon and soon to Mars. Yeah, thanks to Elon Musk. Why? How
get this? How did we get this? Well, you can say, well, this is basically the natural human evolution of our intelligence. Yes, okay, you can say that. But it is more likely to accept that view when you have a worldview that contains or that poses a creator that has created the world using a specific law or a specific set of laws, and he has created us in a specific way that we are able to understand these laws. And that's why one of the very famous historians of science, Australian, he's called Peter Harrison, he says this. He says, for several decades now, however, historians of science have been painstakingly chipping away at the conflict thesis. What he means about the conflict thesis is basically the popular view that science and religion are in conflict with each other. He's saying that historians are trying to dispel this myth. And the result of their labor is a far more complex and nuanced picture of science-religion relations. An important part of this history is the positive role played by religion in the rise of science. In various ways, religious considerations provided the motivations to pursue science, provided its core philosophical presuppositions, informed its methods and content, and lent its social legitimacy. Yani, in very, very plain, simple English. He's trying to say the rise of science could be very easily be traced to a Christian worldview that understood the world to be an ordered place, ordered by an intelligent creator who created us with the same kind of intelligence that would detect this kind of system. If you remove that worldview, if you remove these religious beliefs, he says it is quite unlikely, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely that science would have arisen like it has historically arisen in the 16th and 17th century. There are other social factors basically pertaining to how the church was the biggest supporter of science, biggest investor in scientific advancement, at least in the beginning. Most big universities that we know were founded by Christians for the same reason that, we become better Christians by understanding the world better. Of course, historically, we've drifted away from this kind of mentality. We've come to see science as more of an enemy or a threat to our biblical doctrines. So a lot of Christians have pulled away from science and see it as something that we, let's say, try to make our peace with rather than engage actively in. But that's not what happened historically. Okay? So back to my main structure. Lawrence Krauss says most scientists are not interested in God. This is not true historically, philosophically, and even today from just like the surveys of how scientists function. Now, number two, science renders God unnecessary. Lawrence Krauss, the atheist we talked about, says, okay, not only are scientists uninterested in the question of God, but the more we understand, the more scientific we become, the less we need to think about God at all. And what he's trying to explain is something that is famously called the God of the gaps. I don't know if you've heard of this concept before. He says this. The people who believed in God had very little knowledge of the natural world. They always attributed what they saw in the natural world to physical forces. So thunder is by Zeus, storms are by Poseidon. They attribute these natural phenomena to spiritual forces, simply because they didn't understand how these natural phenomena happened. Okay, and what science does is it tries to explain. So before you had gaps in your knowledge, and then you plugged God in those gaps. I don't understand it, therefore God or gods did it. Okay, that's the God of the gaps. But science, what does it do? It basically shrinks those gaps by increasing our understanding of the natural world, increasing our knowledge. he says progressively our need for God as an explainer or as an explanation of things will recede, and we won't need at all to believe in God for explaining the world. Okay? I want to always also say, I kind of agree with this criticism. I remember when I was beginning my study in this area, I was 16, I had this interest when I was younger, and a lot of people discouraged me, a lot of people in the church discouraged me. They warned me that, the more you dive into this kind of world, the more difficult you will find it to believe, okay? Because these things do not mix very well. So you want to separate them, you want to keep them apart because you don't want these kinds of problems. And what they said, they still want to sound respectful of science, okay? So they said, you know what? This world is so complicated. This world is so, mysterious. How could this come just by chance? Akid, for sure, God has made it. But see how the argument is built here. It's almost an argument out of ignorance, okay? It is because we don't understand the world and it seems so complicated, okay? We must believe in a God, okay? It's almost like you want to remain ignorant of the universe, and that makes it secure for that kind of belief. And Lawrence Krauss, in another writing, he says, the Christians or the believers always want to keep a certain dark corner of the universe that no one understands. This is where they keep their God. Okay? But as a Christian who is interested in science, I want to say that I believe in God not because I don't understand the universe, but because I understand. When my knowledge increases, when my understanding of the universe increases, my appreciation of the nuances and the complexity promotes a belief in God. And let me explain this a little bit more. Professor John Lennox of Oxford, very strong Christian voice in this area, he's tried to explain it this way. He says we need to make a distinction between what he calls mechanism and what he calls agency. Basically, he says the mechanism is the question of how things work. What is the mechanism by which the natural phenomena that we observe happen? Okay, that's the scientific question. But there are other types of questions. It's the why questions. It's the who questions, which are related to agency. For Arabic speakers, the word agency doesn't have like an accurate translation. But basically, when you think of an agent, you think of a mind, you think of an active entity that is working in or around this mechanism. Okay? And the agent questions are basically questions that are trying to answer the why questions. And he gives this very nice example. He says, let's say you want to explain the combustion motor of a car. Of course, this illustration is slowly fading out of trend with the advent of electric cars, but it will do well for now. And he says, you want to explain the car, you must understand the internal combustion, the chemical reaction, the physical reaction, how fuel is sparked and burnt and changed from heat energy into kinetic energy and all the mechanics of the car. You can explain the car very well using that kind of scientific, mechanistic explanation. But then, understanding how the car works does not immediately exclude the question of why is there a car in the first place, okay? And he says, if you say that Henry Ford invented the car, okay, or the modern motor, he says these are not conflicting answers. One answers the question of how the car works, and the other says, why is there a car in the first place? Same way, science explains how the universe works, okay? But God explains why there is a universe that works in this way in the first place, okay? And then go back to the first point that, the kinds of things we understand about the universe promotes a belief in God. Another example. Let's say I want to explain the boiling of water. Very interesting process of agitating molecules using heat and how they vibrate, and then they move from a liquid state to a gas state, and because the lid of the kettle is pressured down, you have an increase in pressure, and that promotes a cycle of boiling, and this is basically how water boils. Yes, very good answer. But also, if you want to explain water boiling, you can say, well, water is boiling because I wanted to drink tea. Okay? And these are not conflicting explanations. One is answering the question of how water boils. The other is answering the question of why water boils. And that is an agent question, because the answer for it is a purpose. The purpose of boiling water is I want to drink tea. We are not cornered into choosing between these two answers. Both are legitimate. Both answer different types of questions around natural phenomena. In the same way, we're not forced to choose between God and science, or theology and science. Science answers the how questions. Theology answers the why questions. And even though some people try to say that these are not important questions, but there seems to be a nagging, persistent need to answer, the questions of why are we here? What is the purpose of life? Why is there something why are there some things that are wrong? Why are there some things as right? Why is something beautiful and why is something ugly? Why should we respect humans and why should we regard life? I mean, there are all kinds of why questions that are still important. To which the answers and the subject of God is very relevant and pertaining. Now, let me try to end this quite technical talk with an example of a good interaction between science and religion. Okay, one big discovery in the mid 20th century was the Big Bang. The Big Bang simply says that there is a definite beginning to our universe, everything that's in it, time, energy, matter, and space, that has begun around 14 billion years ago. And this discovery was promoted by, or let's say, sparked by Edwin Hubble's discovery of something called the red shift. The redshift, basically, in very, very simple terms, is a phenomena that told us that the stars that we see in our telescopes are moving away from us. Okay? They are moving away. So if they are moving away, that means the universe is somehow expanding. It's not stagnant. And put in mind, for the past 2,000 years before Edwin Hubble, the consensus in the cosmology world that the universe is static. It is eternal. It was called the steady state universe. It didn't move. It was like that since eternity past. And that was, by the way, in conflict with the Genesis account that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. However, with the advent of the discovery of the redshift and then with later discoveries, the concept of the Big Bang theory has emerged, which basically says that 14 billion years ago there was a singular, unrepeatable event that sparked the origin of everything in our universe, space, time, energy, and matter. And that expansion was so rapid, it took a few million years before the first atoms were formed, and then a few billion years after that, the stars were formed. And when we reach this modern state in which, the Earth is just right up on the corner there, this is 14 billion years ago. So Big Bang basically says, if you rewind the clock, you will find that the universe is shrinking. I'm going to fall off the stage. Shrinking until it reaches a point of nothingness, okay? A singular, non-space, non-energy, non-time entity, okay? I don't know, you might have heard this before, but how do you feel about this discovery? Does it pose, oh yeah, this is nice, or does it pose a threat, okay, for a religious mind? In my experience, most people, when they first hear it, they feel it as a threat. So God didn't create the universe? It just emerged out of the Big Bang? But hey, we need to, again, be mindful of the distinction between mechanism and agent, okay? The Big Bang is a good explanation of the mechanism by which the universe has emerged, came into existence. It tells us how the universe came into existence, okay? But it doesn't answer the question of why is there a universe in the first place? And that is an important question. Some people would want to say that this is not an important question, okay? Because they say that the brute fact that there is a universe, yes, we understand what was, how it emerged somehow, but what happened before that or in the cause of that is irrelevant. However, I want to, let's say, pose a challenge for this way of thinking. When the scientific consensus was, before Edwin Hubble and that team, when the consensus was that the universe was eternal, steady, okay, no one was interested to speak or ask about the origin of the universe. Well, it's an irrelevant question because there is no origin for something that did not originate. If the universe had no beginning, if the universe was eternal, steady for as long as eternity, then nothing brought it into existence. It was just there, huwa keda in Arabic. It's just there, okay? But when science, not religion, science, when scientists discovered that the universe was not always there, it had a definite beginning in the finite past, immediately comes the question, okay, so what was the transition between no universe and universe? What happened there? Okay, and in fact, because that question was so pressing as a result of the Big Bang, a lot of scientists and philosophers in the mid-20th century rejected the Big Bang. They say it was religion in disguise. Religious scientists trying to sneak God back in by saying that the universe had a beginning. And there was a huge resistance for the Big Bang. But it's a strong theory. It had observation and evidence after evidence after evidence that made it now the dominant view, up till now. Okay? Yes, there are questions around the origin mechanism. I understand that. I'm explaining more of like an introductory level. However, because it is so well tied to a beginning, it sounds almost like Genesis 1. In the beginning, okay, God created the universe. Okay? And that's why this philosopher, Robert Jastrow, in that time was saying this. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. He's speaking about the discovery of the Big Bang, okay? As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. It's a nice sarcastic way of saying, after all this scientific advancement, we return back to the same idea that theologians have always said that the universe has had a beginning because God created it. Okay, let me end by one challenge. Now, the challenge is this. Even though the theory of the Big Bang is very in harmony with the concept of creation, it is not easily harmonized with a basic reading of Genesis 1, which speaks about 7 days, God creating the world with a specific sequence, and I understand this question. But let me try to help you here. This is not a science question. It's an interpretation and theology question, namely about how do we understand the first chapters of Genesis, okay? In the end, I don't want to have like a one-to-one confirmation between a scientific theory and a biblical text. That's not what I'm looking for. I don't want confirmation from science to what I believe from the Bible. But I want my reading of the Bible to be at least consistent, not in opposition to the best scientific data that we have. Yes, science changes. Yes, theories change. It takes a few hundred years for dominant theories to change, and we don't need to change our theology massively because of every scientific new discovery. However, as someone who's trying to be faithful to the gifts that God has given me, to the knowledge that God has made available for us, I want to say very comfortably, as a Christian, I believe in a creator who has created this world. So far as we know, it seems that he has created the world using the Big Bang, utilizing the Big Bang. And I need to think hard about what then does Genesis 1 mean when it says that God has created the heavens and the earth? Does it require me to adhere to a specific sequence, or is there a deeper meaning here? That's a big theological question that we can discuss amongst ourselves. But if I was talking to a friend who basically thinks that, science and faith don't mix, science and faith don't make sense, they're foes, they're enemies, I want to say, no, they're friends, but they have a lot to talk about. They're friends. But they're friends, the relationship is not boring. They have a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about, a lot of work that they need to do on their relationship. And this is where Christian scientists and theologians who are interested in science come together and try to understand the Word of God with faithfulness, with diligence, but also without ignoring God's beautiful world. Okay, they're not in opposition to each other. Frederick Boyle, one of the early scientists, says that God has two books. He has the book of Scripture and the book of nature. Okay, and because they have the same author, they must be in harmony. If we see a conflict at the moment, it's just because we don't understand either of them, or probably don't fully understand both of them. Okay, but eventually, when all is known, when all is revealed, the two books will, end up being beautifully coinciding and congruent with each other. I invite you to love science and encourage your kids to go into the sciences, to contribute and have voices. It's not going to be an easy journey, and they need to do a lot of hard work. But a lot of movements today exist where there is basically a lot of content and suggestions on how to harmonize science and religion together. You had a question.
Sorry, I just had, you were saying the discovery of the Big Bang. What evidence is there of discovery? I think it would be false to say a discovery, but more accurate to say a theory.
Okay, thank you very much. So I use the word discovery loosely in the sense of scientists reaching a consensus after examining the available evidence. Of course, this consensus could change. But let me make one comment on the time. Okay, and Hassan, I'm doing well on time. Okay, let me end with this question, with this idea. I want to comment on our understanding of the term theory. Okay, sometimes we use it in a, let's say, a negative manner. It's just a theory. It's just an idea. It's not a true discovery or something like that. But in the scientific realm, let's say there are three levels of ideas. There are hypotheses. Okay, so hypothesis. Hypo means below. Okay, or under, and a thesis is basically another word for a theory. So a hypothesis is the main proposal, an idea that a specific scientist has. Okay? Now, any hypothesis needs to be tested, either verified or falsified. If a hypothesis survives a few tests, multiple tests, maybe a couple of generations of scientists try to challenge it and see, and if it survives, it is promoted to a theory. So a theory is a scientific idea that has been well tested. It has survived some rigorous investigation. Now, the third and ultimate super duper level of scientific ideas, when a theory has persevered through almost centuries with multiple generations of scientists building on it, and it proving once and again its veracity, it's now promoted to a law. Very few scientific theories have been promoted like this. So gravity was a hypothesis, then it was promoted to a theory. Now, loosely it's called, generally it's called the law of gravity. It would be very hard to disprove it, extremely hard to disprove it. Theories in the middle. You can disprove a theory, but it will take you more than one challenge or one piece of evidence against that theory. You need like not a silver bullet. You need more like a machine gun of evidence that is against that theory that would basically promote scientists to find an alternative for it. Okay? So the Big Bang, for example, is for now the dominant theory. Okay? Doesn't mean it's going to persevere forever. But for now, the info that we have, the evidence that we have says that it's quite a solid idea. I'm not gonna die on a hill for it. I could change my mind, that's fine. But it has persevered for a few generations now. We can discuss more if you're interested. Thank you very much. I hope this was interesting for you. We are going to get more personal as the day progresses, so please stay with us. I think we have a break, 10-minute break. Very generous. Thank you. Thank you very much.